Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Jasmine Nolan Eccles. We're going to call the first public hearing to order. In order to do so, I'm going to pass the second item on the agenda to Secretary Bobo for a roll call of commissioners.
Yes, please identify yourself by saying here or present. Commissioner Anna Crossland.
Present.
Commissioner Dwight. Commissioner Grant.
Present.
Commissioner Garth. Commissioner Nolan Eccles.
Present.
Commissioner Sheridan.
Present.
Commissioner Riley. Commissioner Intagliata.
Present.
And now I will move to our non-voting members as well. Director Ingracia. Counselor Sheena Hamilton.
Present.
Commissioner Sonia Jenkins Gray. Commissioner Green. Commissioner Milberg.
Present.
And Commissioner Hummel. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Bobo. The next item on the agenda is for the Charter Commission charge that will occur from our Vice Chair Sheridan.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being at the first public hearing for the St. Louis Charter Commission. Just a couple of points to share with everybody as we enter into tonight for the public hearing. It doesn't strike me as it strikes me as odd when I think about the fact that the Charter Commission was first put into place in 1914 and has yet to be amended or updated. That we've got over 100 years worth of work to do. And as I was talking to one of my fellow commissioners this evening, this first Charter Commission, this commission that was been assembled this year, will probably have a lot of heavy lifting. The good news is that this process will repeat itself every 10 years, and that means that there will be ongoing opportunities for sessions like this and for additional amendments to come to the foreground. One of the things that I wanted to point out as we're having these discussions and hearing from the public is because of the unique nature of the City of St. Louis government structure and the fact that there is a City of St. Louis County, there are 8 offices that are part of the county that aren't really under the jurisdiction of the Charter Commission. These are 8 elected offices that we have heard from different conversations people may have opinions of or might want to see some changes in, but they're not part of the scope of the commission. And those are the circuit attorney, the circuit clerk, the collector of revenue, license collector, public administrator, recorder of deeds, sheriff, and the treasurer's office. If we want to see changes there, it's the state constitution, and that's beyond our pay grade for this session. The last thing that I'll mention is that the mandate of this charter is to hear from the public and from experts so that we can shape either a new charter, provisions to the charter, or amendments to the charter. And as those get shaped and discussed among the commissioners, it does require a 2/3 vote of voting commissioners for any of those items to move forward to go to the voters. And then once they do go to the voters, it's 3/5 qualified vote when we have those on the ballot. And so really this is an important part of the evening. An important part of this process is to hear from you and ideas and thoughts that you have related to how this city could be a better instrument to serve its public. So with that, I turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. The next item on the agenda is public comment. I have Keith Rose as the first person for public comment pertaining to scheduling online. And then I have several sheets here that I'll call after the 4 persons that have registered on the commission's website. Keith Rose, are you here? The next person is Charles Bryson. Yes.
Dear Madam Chairwoman, members of the Charter Commission, and audience attendees, TrailNet, of which I am the advocacy person, is a regional nonprofit organization devoted to safe streets for all users, pedestrians, people who have a disability, cyclists, scooter users, and certainly drivers. We are recommending this body send to the voters the charter change in Section 13 to establish a City Department of Transportation. The mission of the new City Department of Transportation should be promote the health, safety, and well-being of City of St. Louis residents and business employees by providing a multimodal transportation system that supports all transportation modes, encourages growth and opportunity, supports neighborhood development, encourages complete streets, and is based on accepted practices from the Federal Highway Administration and National Association of City Transportation Officials. The new department would keep the divisions and activities it already has, but the following would be added: a division of traffic engineering and planning, a division of contracting and contract monitoring, and sidewalk maintenance. And I included sidewalk maintenance because an overall transportation department strategy must include sidewalk maintenance and replacement. The city cannot have a quality transportation system with a division between the maintenance of streets and the maintenance of sidewalks. There are a number of cities of various sizes and challenges, such as Denver, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Oakland, Boston, and Austin, Texas, that have recently changed their streets or public works department to transportation departments. All, to our knowledge, have done so with success. The request is not to demean or diminish the work of the current Streets Department, the Board of Public Service, or the Department of Planning and Urban Development. It is, however, to acknowledge the change in times and the need to incorporate all forms and methods of transportation and its administration thereof in future planning for streets and sidewalks of the city. Finally, with all recommendations you will receive during the course of your travels, it should not be about departments that might be affected, as most will say, everything is fine. It should be, might this recommendation make the city better now for the residents and businesses and in the future? That should be the real test. Chairman, thank you, commissioners, for your time and consideration of this request, and I will take any questions the chairwoman so desires.
Commissioners, do we have any questions? Thank you. The next public comment is from Nancy Thompson.
I'm Nancy Thompson. I'm the co-president of the League of Women Voters of Metro St. Louis. My other co-president, Victoria Turner, is here tonight as well. As you know, we at League of Women Voters have been watching carefully and listening and trying to learn along with you. We thank you for your service in this sometimes thankless job, one that takes a lot of your time and energy, I know. I wanted to just make 2 points very fast that we've probably made before, but we want to make sure that we emphasize to you the importance of trying to engage the public. We know it's just not the easiest task to get somebody to plug into something as abstract as a city charter. It's not like saying, let's have a meeting about crime or let's have a meeting about sidewalks. It's just not the same thing. But please make your very best effort in that regard. Also, I just want to reiterate that as you know, I think, from our brief conversation about the meetings that League of Women Voters and SLACO and Neighborhoods United for Change held during December, our membership and the city residents in general are looking for big change, not minor change, not tweaks, especially in light of, as Vice Chair pointed out, it's been 100 years, so it's just time to do quite a few things if we can. I have a question for you, actually, which you could deal with tonight or more likely in your next meeting. I think I have watched or attended all the meetings, unless it's in the last week or so, And I'm not clear, and I think none of our leadership is clear on the extent to which various items that are changes in the charter will be bundled together. For instance, so someone said in one of your work group meetings, well, it's obsolete language to talk about the Board of Aldermen. So if you talk about the Board of Aldermen and you change that to City Council, is that one ballot proposition throughout the charter, or how is that going to work? I heard one of your work groups say that they had 13 proposed amendments that they had in mind already. So if each group of the 3 work groups did that, that'd be 39 ballot propositions. And we're just interested in how that's all going to work.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any comment? Okay. The next public comment is from Daniel. I cannot pronounce your last name. If you're here. Don't believe so.
What's the spelling?
Daniel, the spelling of the last name is Schesch. Is that you? All right. Sesh.
Okay, a brief preface is that the voters hold the mayor and the board of aldermen answerable for the state of the city, not the E&A. So that drives my suggestions. I would suggest the mayor present a budget to E&A weeks before presenting it to the alder people. But E&A would no longer be required to approve the budget, but suggest changes. The mayor may or may not incorporate their suggestions into an amended budget that they then present to the Board of Aldermen. For changes not incorporated that were suggested, the comptroller and the president of the Board of Aldermen may then suggest amendments to the Board of Aldermen, but the ultimate decider is the mayor and the Board of Aldermen. The Board of Aldermen should be able to add, delete, increase, or decrease proposed line items in the budget. But their completed project, before they send it back to the mayor, must be balanced. Enablers. The Board of Aldermen has to hire budget and financial staff to support its increased decision-making role. And the mayor should have a line item veto or modification subject to Board of Aldermen override. Second suggestion, eliminate the county offices, which are basically administrative. Roll those functions into departments answerable to the mayor. The collector of revenue, license collector, recorder of deeds. These department heads could be grandfathered later on, they would be mayoral nominees subject to confirmation by the Board of Aldermen. The treasurer function should move to the comptroller's office, who would still be independently elected. Parking should become a city department, and all revenues go to the city of St. Louis, not off to some independent account someplace. The sheriff should be appointed by and report to the circuit courts. County comments along those lines. County offices are basically patronage fiefdoms. Voter control is an illusion. There's no information available to voters on how well or how poorly these county offices carry out their functions.
30 seconds.
A minute or how much?
30 seconds.
Oh, boy. Okay. Incumbents campaigning for ward endorsements always mention how many ward residents they employ, sometimes including relatives and friends of the aldermen and committee people. Last suggestion is, and I was a former personnel manager, personnel directors, mayor should be a mayoral appointee, not a fiefdom independent center of power, who may or may not support the mayor's staffing needs and standards. The position should be subject to confirmation, but also subject to discipline or dismissal for cause. I support collective bargaining, but it should be striking and work action should be prohibited, and those prohibitions should have teeth to them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question
Go ahead.
for the witness, if maybe allowed him a little more time. And if I may ask a question of you, sir. One justification or rationale that we've heard or that's advanced for the Board of E&A and for the limited power of the Board of Aldermen related to budgeting, that they can only decrease items. One justification we've heard is that it's a necessary check on out-of-control spending, and it's necessary for good budgeting and not running deficits. I'd just be curious to know what response, if any, you would have to that.
Well, I believe state law requires that the balance be budget. They can't do deficit spending. I could be wrong. So basically, that function, like with the United States Congress or the state legislature, has to be carried out by the Board of Aldermen. However, if the board approves a budget, maybe they add too much, and the ballot they send to the mayor is not balanced, the mayor can immediately send it back and say, don't send me a budget unless it's balanced. So, if you're going to add something, then you cut something else. So that would be the control. Instead of devolving it from the comptroller and president of the Board of Aldermen, get that responsibility down to the Board of Aldermen, which is now a more manageable size.
Thank you.
Okay. I can bring up a copy of my remarks and leave it with you. Thank you.
Chairwoman, if I may, Commissioner Ingracia did send me a message letting me know that she signed in online and wanted everyone to know.
Okay.
I'll make a mark of that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The next public comment is from Michael J. Vaughn.
Good evening, Dr. Eccles and commissioners.
Good evening.
Private land speculators throughout the north side of the city are tying up land that could be used for development. Right now, we're facing decreasing population. Crime isn't in check. We have people leaving the city for the county. And the ultimate impact that this is going to have is we have that inconvenient thing called the 2030 census. And when our population is deemed to be less than it was in 2020, the city of St. Louis will lose federal and state matching dollars. We are proposing that to free up this land for development in the north side neighborhoods, that we go ahead and propose either a LVT or an LIF, a land value tax or a land impact fee on those people who are holding in excess of 3 parcels or 3 plots of land in any given neighborhood. One such example that we have an entity in Van Vetter neighborhood that bought 44 lots in 2020 with the promise to develop them. I went online, and in 2023, they paid a total of roughly $2,400 in real estate tax on those 44 lots. Had those lots been developed, the city would have realized the amount of close to $36,000 had the promise been fulfilled. So I think that it's imperative that we rely on the government and the charter to step in and create uncertainty for these people so that they go ahead and develop the land as they had promised to do. their impact is a decrease in acceptable housing. It decreases and suppresses the value of existing homes, their assessed and market value. And so I believe that if government steps in and figures out a way to apply some pressure on these people, I think that we can turn the tide possibly, or at least stop the hemorrhaging of our population loss, which is going to impact us across the board down the line fiscally. So that is all that I have to add to this. I have a handout for you. It explains in greater detail. Before I come down, does anyone have questions?
I do.
Okay.
Where in the charter would your recommendation be applied?
I did not have time to go through the charter, but I noticed on the list that we originally got at the meeting, I believe it was on the 8th, that taxes was put on there, and that's the box I checked. So the only reason I propose a land value tax, I know we're facing some legislative pressure out of Jefferson City on several other taxes that we have. Some states have found, I don't know how Missouri is set up, some states have found that if they do it as a fee, they can bypass the legislative process to institute that.
Thank you. We have an announcement. Car license plate 2H5K9R. It's a Ford in the east lot. Your flashes are on.
That's my car. Sorry. Apologies.
You turn your flashes.
I'll step away and you'll still have a quorum. I'll be right back.
Good luck, Carol. Be careful.
Okay, the next public comment is, I believe this is Judith. It's League of Women Voters, but I want to make sure I don't believe. Okay, how are you?
I am fine. My name is Judith Arnold.
Okay.
I'm with the League of Women Voters, St. Louis Association of Community Organizations, and Neighborhoods United for Change. We attended your last commission hearing where we handed you a report of recordings of our town hall meetings that was held earlier in the month. And we asked that you all meet with us so that we could go further over that report with you. And I'm imploring today that you do diligence on that request.
Is that your comment?
That's my comment.
Okay. My response to that is the city councilor's office and the commission staff are getting back with you this week pertaining to our in-person special meeting.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. The next public comment is from John Chasnoff.
Hi, my name's John Chasnoff, and I'm here representing the Coalition Against Police Crimes and Repression, of which I've been a longtime member. CAPCAR has been a leading force for civilian oversight in the city for many, many years, and I'm speaking on topics related to that civilian oversight. I think we'd all agree that one of the major functions of government is to make sure that it's operating ethically and that it's operating within all the laws that govern it. And one of the mechanisms that's been evolved in the last few decades to make sure that that happens is civilian oversight. Back in early 20th century, when the charter was first written, the types of oversight that have now come into being were not even imagined. And so I'd like to speak specifically to the way in which I think that the charter is inhibiting civilian oversight and causing a lack of accountability for the city. And specifically, I'm referring to City Charter 3.10.020, which has to do with the city councilor's powers. So without going into all the details of that language, essentially that provision in the charter gives the city councilor authority over all officers in the city and gives to the city councilor the ability to make all advisements, to handle all lawsuits, and to review and and sign all contracts. What's happened is that there's developed a conflict of interest. So the city councilor's job, one of the major jobs of the city councilor, is to make sure that the city is not opening itself up to liability, try to protect the city from lawsuits, which is an understandable and laudable goal. But on the other hand, one of the byproducts of civilian oversight is that misconduct is often revealed and the possibility of lawsuits is created. For the city councilor to have authority over limiting liability from the city and also having control over civilian oversight has created a lot of tension. We've had now civilian oversight of police since 2015, and in that original agreement, it wasn't written on paper, but verbally we had an agreement with the city that there would be a wall built inside the city councilor's office so that the councilor who was dealing with civilian oversight wouldn't have anything to do with the other people in the office who were dealing with other issues. But that wall really was never created. And there's been some recommitment to creating such a barrier, but I don't think it really goes far enough. Again, without going in detail, we've put together some language that we'd like to propose that exempts the oversight bodies from the city councilor's influence unless they request it. If they ask for advice or ask for counsel, they can receive it. But if they need to sign a contract for independent counsel, they could do that as well. In the past year or so, we've complicated the accountability systems in the city. We used to just have the Civilian Oversight Board. We then created a Detention Facilities Oversight Board, and then put both of those boards under the auspices of a new division called the Division of Civilian Oversight. So we think it's important for both of those advisory boards, as well as the Division of Civilian Oversight, to be able to create for themselves access to independent counsel. And that's what our recommendation is about. Again, I've given a handout here and have for anybody else in the audience who's interested who wants to go into more detail. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions for the public comment? I have a question. Where would you recommend your position pertaining to the city councilor's office be reflective in the charter?
Again, in this document, I quote the relevant part of 310.020 and recommend that, exactly where we could insert some new language and propose that new language as well in our written recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just as a quick comment, 3.10, that's city code, not the city charter. So I think that we would welcome any thoughts you might have about where in the charter that could fit. 3.010 is part of the city code. So just making sure that the commissioners are aware of that. Yes.
The next public comment is from Ronald Jackson.
Thank you, commissioners, for letting me be here. I don't have any detailed information to share. I just want to tell you that I'm from Kansas City, Missouri. I came to St. Louis in 1954, Kansas City had 125,000 people. St. Louis had 850,000 people. Fast forward to 2024, you know what the numbers look like now, don't you? And the big difference is change, governmental change. Kansas City changed because they had to change their form of government because the mafia ran Kansas City. And they were in a crisis, and they had to change their form of government. And they changed their form of government, and they became a part of Jackson County. Kansas City became a part of Jackson County. And over the next 60 to 70 years, we can see how Kansas City changed in a positive direction, whereas unfortunately, we in St. Louis are sliding down the side of a mountain. And if we don't figure out a way to change the charter of the city in terms of the form of government, because our form of government is archaic. This is an 1890s form of government. Mayor, comptroller, board of aldermen. That don't work in 2024, except in Baltimore and St. Louis. So we have to get some passion about change. I mean, details are wonderful, but in terms of people in neighborhoods and communities, you know, they ain't paying attention to the details. We have to get some passion, some commitment, some vision among leaders in St. Louis, like you all on this charter commission, to change St. Louis in a positive direction in the next year. And you know, one thing I've concluded is, you know, when you look at, you know, who gets elected to office and who doesn't, you know, and in recent years, you know, one of the things that has interested me is how emotion impacts how people vote.
30 seconds.
Emotion impacts how people vote. So you need to, as the commissioners, figure out a way to get some passion and some commitment and dedication and leadership around positive change for the city of St. Louis. Thank you.
Thank you. The next public comment is from Alec Belcher.
Hello, thank you, Charter. My name is Alec. I play in the St. Louis Symphony, but I'm actually here just to speak in favor that the Charter Commission consider forming a Department of Transportation. I think that with pedestrian deaths from traffic in the U.S. reaching a 40-year all-time high, I think it's important that we act fast and efficiently to improve pedestrian and bike infrastructure in the city. And I think the best way to do that would probably be to streamline that process as much as possible and have a Department of Transportation just like the county and just like the state as well. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioners, that is all of the public comment forms that we have. I know it's a bit unorthodox, but would you all like to open the floor to any additional public comment that does not have a form?
Yes, and I would like to hear from anyone in the audience who may have a comment or a response to some of the comments that have been made so far that may have jogged their memories or made them interested in following up on those comments.
Okay. Sorry. Ms. Hamilton, I know that you stood up. Do you have anything for us before we open the floor for? Okay. If we have any other public comment pertaining to the comments that were made or any comments that you may have and you did not get to do a speaker slip, if you could proceed to the mic at this time, we're going to allow some time for additional public comment pertaining to the charter. And I believe that we want to do that because we want to make sure that we're hearing from the public the way that we need to before we discuss and deliberate further into our work groups and into our public meetings about what needs to take place pertaining to the amendments. So this is the time, if you have anything to contribute to the discussion about the charter recommendations or amendments of any kind. Nobody? Thank you.
Hello. My name is Noah Goldman. I'm a resident of the city and I work at Washington University. I would like to speak in favor of the proposal that Charles has made for forming a Department of Transportation for the city of St. Louis. I believe this would help the city to more efficiently build safer streets. For example, in the recently passed Board Bill 120 pertaining to redesigning certain streets in the city to be safer for all road users. This legislation relied on private contractors outside of the city to do the design and building work. If the city had a Department of Transportation, they could more efficiently go through the process of designing and building safer streets. That is all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, do we have any comment on transportation or the formulation of a transportation aspect to the charter? It's come up a few times here.
So one question I would invite the public, including the commenters who already spoke, is that, so the existing charter in the board of the provision of the article on the Board of Public Service has a provision that allows cooperation among departments, including streets and other departments. And I'm just curious as to whether that is not good enough to, and I can see Mr. Bryson getting ready to stand up, why that isn't good enough to address these problems related to safety and vehicular, car accidents and pedestrian safety and the like.
So there's several reasons, Commissioner, and thank you for the question. Number one, you have what I would consider a ping pong effect. So you have 3 different entities that are responsible for all of the safety related to streets, sidewalks, et cetera. And think of how do you make sure that each entity is doing exactly what it's supposed to do? What are the provisions for them doing it? For example, let's say that the Streets Department wants to issue a RFQ, let's say an RFQ. That RFQ actually is issued not by the Streets Department, who should have a strong understanding of what they want to do. It actually goes to the Board of Public Service and they issue it. So they may issue it 3 days from now, 3 months from now, a year from now. It is up to them to carry that out. There also is no real provision for monitoring. So if I gave you $1,000 and said, this is what I want out of my $1,000, but you now have that money in your hand, so you literally can do anything with it that you want and then give a report back to me as to what you did. I'm sunk. I have no recourse to do anything for or against you. And think of it this way. Why in the world can we do transportation when we have a streets department that is only from curb to curb, basically, and we have the Board of Public Service that is sidewalks? How do you actually create safety in your community planning for it, because I haven't got to that part yet, planning for it and executing it if you have 3 different entities that control the process. That's archaic. And then let's start all the way at the beginning. It is my understanding, may not be quite correct, but there's no traffic calming employees, using that term to mean whether you're an engineer, you're an architect, in the streets department. You have to go to BPS, or you go to planning department, or you outsource it. So the streets department doesn't really have control over virtually anything they do other than the other divisions that we talked about earlier, whether that be towing, whether that be some of the other things, asphalting. But almost everything else is out of the control of the streets department, other than the 4, 5, or 6. I think she's come to speak to you, the director. Other than those 3, 4, 5 things, the real major emphasis that would make our streets safer is not in the control of the streets department. Creating a Department of Transportation and moving some of those functions into that Department of Transportation, and I apologize, I will send you this evening or tomorrow morning my comments, because one of the things that, let's take St. Louis County has, I'm sorry, I'm long-winded. One of the things St. Louis County has is a mission statement. We need to have a mission statement for a new Department of Transportation that enshrines the activity that they should be doing.
Thank you.
If I could ask Mr. Bryson, you've worked for government for a number of years, and so you know how complex the issue of charter and ordinances are. And you also are aware, I'm sure, that that as a commission, we have quite a challenge, which is, quite honestly, that it's likely that more than 3 or 4 ballot measures, maybe more than the community, that the voters can tolerate this next time around. So the question becomes, what are the core issues that create the big change that are necessary for this city to move forward, as we've heard it's necessary to do? And which issues might be handled through ordinance over the next decade? Because, in fact, what is stipulated within the charter about those subjects are so little and so vague that the actual descriptions of what they're doing and where it's being done are done through ordinance, not through charter. So from what your knowledge is of the subject of transportation, how is it possible to make some of these kinds of changes without doing it through charter, because we have these other issues also that we need to be dealing with?
Commissioner, thank you for the question. I would say this: death from a vehicle, serious injury from a vehicle, from people who are pedestrians, bicyclists, scooters, folks with a disability who are just trying to get around, is central and should be one of the core elements of a city Department of Transportation, to try to mitigate some of the violence that we see on a regular basis. If I asked everybody in the audience to raise your hand if you have been cut off while driving or almost hit by walking, almost everybody in this room would raise their hand. That's a huge problem. It also impacts everything else. So to be able to be mobile, transportation in this community is vital to its success. And so what you see is various surveys, whether it's the TrailNet crash report, whether you see the report that came out of the League of Women Voters, whether you see the information from Transform 314, one of the top issues is something directly related to streets. So in my humble opinion, Everyone is calling out. Please help our streets and sidewalks be safe. That should be among your most important priorities.
Thank you. Yes.
Since we're talking about transportation, if I could just add something to that, when we're talking about
Your mic, Jake.
Okay, how about, there we go. So when people are talking about creating a transportation department, I think one of the things that often gets overlooked, and I don't want the alder people to be mad at me, but there's also another layer. Aldermen pass ordinances to put a stop sign somewhere, whether or not it is deemed by the streets department or whoever that it should be there. They put in speed humps based on people being angry about someone flying down their street. Then they spend their ward capital money to put that in. Rather than that all being under one department that should do that based on studies, based on speeding, based on the traffic volume that goes through. If you think that the alder people want to have to pick between who gets a stop sign and who doesn't, they don't. They're just getting beat up at neighborhood meetings about they saw a car flying down the street. All of these other things. So you actually have a whole nother layer of elected officials that are getting pressure because this isn't functional, and they're having to go in and piecemeal put things in and do the best job they can based on what happens at the time. And that's not fair to them.
Jake, if you could, get the mic one more time because I have a question. Pertaining to it not being fair to the alderpersons and all of those involved with the process,
That's just my opinion.
Yes. But what's the solution pertaining to what we can recommend or amend in the charter?
Well, I think that the overarching, we've heard from a lot of people that have suggested that that should be the case, that there should be an overall transportation department. I don't know if that's the answer or not. I don't know if that could be handled under one merged department, but I think you should take that responsibility away from the alder people to make them spend their limited resources that they have trying to fix up the neighborhood on speed humps or put in stop signs or get, all of these things. I don't think they should have to have that responsibility. You should have someone that goes in and says, okay, if you want a speed hump in here or you want to do something like that, we should have a metric by which that is measured, not Janice or Bob next door are very angry about the teenager that's speeding down their street, but they're the loudest at the neighborhood meeting, so they get a multi-$1,000 speed hump when one may not be needed.
Yes.
Thank you. Again, I apologize for not giving you all my testimony beforehand. You'll get it. The two other things. One is suggested or recommended that you follow the Federal Highway Administration guidelines or the National Association of City Transportation Officials. Both of them would be excellent resource to do just that, to do more planning, to find out where some of these things need to go and take that away from the alderman, not meaning that they shouldn't have input in the process. But if you follow the federal highway guidelines or the National Transportation of City Official guidelines, that would be important for a city department of transportation to follow those resources.
I'm gonna just say it. Okay. I think that. Go ahead. Before I get to your public comment, I want to state that I believe, Daniel, your comment is in alignment with the transportation concern and some of the connective administrative accountability concepts, even with the city councilors' amendments and recommendations. So if you all have the letters that you wrote or the reports that you compiled, if you can make sure that we get those before you leave today, that will help a lot. I just wanted to make that statement. I know you have one.
I just wanted to say real quickly, I appreciated the correction, and I've changed the citation. It's Article 10, Section 2 of the charter.
Thank you.
referring to. So my comments still stand, but the citation was incorrect. I appreciate the correction.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone, and thank you to the commission for having this public meeting here tonight. My name is Michael Browning. I'm an alderman for the city of St. Louis in the 9th Ward, which represents the Central West End, Forest Park Southeast, Kings Oak, and a little bit of the Vandevetter neighborhood. Instead of just guessing about what the aldermen feel, I felt I should just come up here and say what a lot of us are feeling, which is that the way we currently do our streets is fragmented and disjointed and leads to tragedy on our streets. Absolutely right, we don't want to be deciding where speed humps go or where stop signs go, but it's the only button we have to push right now when someone says that they are dealing with traffic violence on their street. So, of course, that's the button that gets pushed. And that's why St. Louis is one of the humpiest cities in the entire country, because we just keep pushing that button. So I think it's really important to note that this desire for a Department of Transportation is not just shared by the majority of our citizens, but also something that the board itself is interested in looking into, because the way we currently do things on a ward-by-ward basis does lead to that fragmentation and that piecemeal approach. Even the street paving, which we can all agree is something that needs to be done in a more comprehensive way, is done on a ward-by-ward basis right now, largely funded out of ward capital. What this amounts to is the alderperson driving around in a truck with someone from streets saying, this street needs to be paved, this street needs to be paved. And it's the 21st century. I can't emphasize enough that that is not a proper way to do city design. It leads to incredibly inequitable outcomes. And if you want to look at the statistics, who are dying on our streets, it is black and brown people. So we need to be very honest with ourselves about what this city needs to do to make sure that we are prepared for the future and really a city that people want to move to and live in. And transportation is where it's at. If you can't get around safely, you're not going to want to be around here. So just to echo all the comments made tonight, I think that this would be an excellent recommendation from the Charter Commission, because it would show that we are moving on something that is one of the top concerns of most people in the city, and I think a commonly shared feeling among the Board of Aldermen.
So, Michael, are you recommending that there be a Department of Transportation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I want to make sure, is it the comment pertaining to taxes? Was that John? Okay. John, if you could come down for me for a second.
Mr. Bone.
Yes, subpoena. That's Michael. Michael, okay.
Some people call me all kinds of things, I'll still answer.
I'm making sure I have about 10 forms up here. I want to make sure. I want to come back to the taxes comment, and you also referenced North St. Louis, which is my home. I want to ask you more questions since I have some time.
Okay.
Pertaining to what the tax increase or the tax allocation that you referenced, where would those funds be utilized in the city? Pertaining to Daniel's comment on restructuring responsibility, where would the tax funds that are derived from who has ownership over certain parcels or a certain percentage of parcels in particular areas like North St. Louis, where would those funds be allocated to?
So you're talking about the funds that you would raise if the tax was instituted?
Correct.
I would say that those strongly need to go to the Streets Department, Building Department, and Forestry Department. We have a saying in Vandevetter neighborhood, you don't invite company over till you clean your house. Our neighborhood is the same way. And so since those departments by and large spearhead that effort, I think that those budgetary dollars should go to them.
Okay. Go ahead.
Michael, are there other municipalities or areas where LVT or LIF have been instituted and that there's been a record of success or a record of activity that you're aware of?
By and large, LVTs are more popular in Europe. I did it as an LVT. Down in Florida, they have what they call an impact fee. Now, the purpose of the impact fee is because everybody's moving to Florida, everybody's developing land, and they're impacting services. So a fee's attached at the very beginning when they're getting their plans approved to build their home or whatever. It usually runs about $4,000 or $5,000. That was back in 2003. And so everybody just does it as a normal course of business. My reason for bringing it up as an LIF, or a land impact fee, is because we know the state legislature is breathing down our back right now about the 1% income tax, personal property tax. They hate that word tax, but I've noticed that Republicans don't mind raising fees in their state. So I think the Democrats should go ahead and play the game by their rules, and we'll call it a fee. There might be something that the city councilor could comment on as far as, I know a tax probably has to go through the state legislature for approval. I don't know if a fee does or not. And so if you do it as a flat fee per lot, one of the things that we had is that property tax rate on a standard vacant lot with the city of St. Louis right now, they pay about $38.71 on a lot. If they hold more than 3 lots, it's in the handout that I gave to them. If they own more than 3 lots, what it would do is I went and took a house that was built in about the 1890s, still occupied, never been improved. What did they pay in property taxes? Went to a house of the same like kind that had been rehabbed. What did they pay in property taxes? We have homes in Van Vetter neighborhood. They're about 5 to 15 years old. What do they pay in property taxes? And we have some new construction. What did they pay as an annual property tax rate? I added them together, divided them by 4, came up with $267, which ironically is about the average we pay for property taxes on our homes in Van Vetter neighborhood. The thing is that these people went in under the promise of developing this land. They purchased it from LRA. They purchased it privately with the idea that they're going to develop the land. The first stage in development is to draw up architectural plans. Once they meet that particular point, that satisfies the process, unless somebody really raises a stink about it. It satisfies the development aspect for the seller of the property. Then the land sits there, and the whole time, this whole time that he's, that Van Vetter Estates, which is one of 3 or 4 in our neighborhood, they've been gypping just on 44 lots. They've been gypping the city about out of $8,000 of revenue every year that they've held those since 2020. And they were supposed to start development immediately. Nothing's going on. Then it turns around and it impacts city services because they don't keep the lots up. So then we have to go to CSB, file a complaint, goes to forestry, forestry has to come out and mow. And they're perfectly fine with that. They get hit for $100, $150 to have a individual lot mowed because that may be the only address that got turned in, instead of paying $5,000 a year to a landscaping company to come in and mow it and keep it nice. And so it impacts existing homes' values. It's causing us not to be able to create housing for people to attract them back into the city. And I've got to say, 2030 is not far around. It's not far off. We have a lot of proposals that are going to require money. We're not getting a lot of them that are saying, hey, I may have an idea for you. Here, you can get some over here. And I can say just offhand, one individual I will not mention by name, but we know, he owns 11,000 parcels in North City. So start doing the math with that, and it adds up. And when you multiply the smaller private land speculators in other neighborhoods across the city, we're talking about millions of dollars a year that the city isn't getting, and they're harming our city.
Thank you, Michael. I have a public comment form from Liz Kramer.
Hello, commission members. What introduction do I need? I'm sorry, I've just arrived.
Any introduction you want is pretty.
Excellent, thank you. My name is Liz Kramer. I am a resident of the 7th Ward, and I'm the former co-chair of the Community Mobility Committee. I'm here to speak tonight on something I think you've already heard about, thinking about transportation and infrastructure in our city. I've spent the last 10 years advocating for walking and for biking and taking transit, and I've lived a big chunk of that time in St. Louis without a car. It's really hard to get around here without a car. It's hard to get around here if you have a car. And for me, I have access to a lot of resources to move myself around, and almost 20% of our city doesn't have access to a car, and even if they do, it's a limiting factor in their affordability and accessibility. So why is this important when we think about the charter? That's an infrastructure situation. But I think one of the reasons why that is such a fundamental problem is because we don't have a system that really supports building good infrastructure, managing our assets as a city, and taking care of them with a set of priorities that puts our most vulnerable residents in a place where they can be protected, they can have access to mobility, and they can enjoy getting around here. That's what we want. We want people to go places in St. Louis. So I have spoken to you all before, but I really am excited to see the possibility of having a reorganization of the way the city government works. I think for me, there's a couple components that have come up from other folks in the community that I think are really important to consider. One of those is a Department of Transportation. And I think what's so critical about that is because we are already so fragmented as a region, being able to have one entity within city government that can be a real interface with our regional government, with the federal government, and set a vision and a priority about mobility and transportation that meets the needs of all sorts of residents in St. Louis and isn't necessarily prioritizing people who are driving over people who are walking or taking transit or biking. The other component that I think is really valuable about that, about a possible restructuring, is to think about a city manager, someone who can really be accountable and can think about the long-term strength and asset that we have in our civil service. We have such great people working in the city, and they know so many things, and I want them to be able to take on that work and make things happen and make change happen. And from what I have learned, certainly I am no public administration expert here, but from what I've learned from following your process, from learning from other members of the committee, that might be a structure that's really apt for the size of our city now and for the kinds of resources that we have. So I want to say that I think this is a really exciting time for us to have our city government really be structured and reflect what it is that we want to see as a city, so that when we set a vision and when we set a set of priorities, we can follow through on that, on action and implementation. And I think that requires having some consolidation and streamlining and being really clear about what it is that we want to have happen. So I'm grateful for the time. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Liz. Commissioners, do we have any discussion or any more questions for the public? The next item on the agenda is to adjourn before I give instructions about future public comment.
No, good session.
Okay. We want to make sure that the public understands that you are welcome with your public comments at both public hearings and public meetings that are conducted and scheduled on the commission's website, where you can either complete forms or you can come in person to our public meetings every month, or our public hearings that will be announced and scheduled and listed on our website. The next item on the agenda is to adjourn our public hearing. I'm willing to, thank you.
Second.
Commissioner Bobo, if you could do the count for adjourning the public hearing.
All those in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you.